Alright, I guess we might as well get started. I guess people will be coming in as we're moving along. Okay, so you're here because you want to learn how to program, and specifically, you want to learn how to program games. That is something I can really relate to, and hopefully, you guys will appreciate all the things that I have to say. So, starting off, what is coding? At its core, coding is this way that you communicate to a computer. It gets a lot of bad rap because it's unapproachable, because you just see a lot of like characters and just it looks like the Matrix. But really, if you break it down, you got two things: you have syntax and you have logic. The syntax of programming is like the grammar. It's the part that looks scary. It's the letters and the symbols and the different colors and the stuff that looks like raw computer that you don't understand unless you know what you're looking at. And that's what's hard for beginners is the syntax. But the other thing that when you're beginning that you don't really know about is the logic. The logic of programming is actually the hardest part. That's the majority of the work even. Syntax you can learn in a matter of like a month at worst because you never memorize all syntax. You just sort of know enough to move forward, and you can Google something if you forget it. But the logic is where you'll really find most of your struggles. Um, so going back to syntax, I wrote here that it can only be learned from memorization and relying on your IDE, which if you did the pre-stream project, you'll have already set up. That's something like Visual Studio or Vim or things like that. Those can tell you when your syntax is wrong pretty much the same way like Microsoft Word does. They just give you like little red squiggles and it'll yell at you, and it's really easy to just look at and figure out what it wants to change. It's only hard when you're a beginner, honestly, because a lot of the things that you're trying to learn are really unfamiliar. Here, I'll even show you. Like, as a beginner, this just looks horrifying. You just see this, you're like, why is this gray? Why is this blue? I've never manually typed this symbol out. What does it mean? Why is there a green squiggle? What does static mean? There's just a tons of stuff. But it really starts to become easy the more and more you get used to it, which is why I recommend if you do finish the practice project, you really should just keep doing more stuff. The more time you spend writing code, the easier it gets to know syntax. So here's the logic part, though. Logic is, in a way, logic is about figuring out how to explain a solution to a problem. Um, let's take a computer that wants to solve math, like a basic calculator. You would break down the things by saying, wait for the user to put in a number. When they put in a number, store it. When they push one of the operator buttons, like the plus or the divide, prepare to take in another number to do math with it. And learning how to like take these like long-winded explanations and turn them into computer code, into syntax. That's where the logic's at. Things like algorithms aren't difficult. They're just not something that we're used to in our daily lives. Programming sort of works backwards. You guys will see that later. So, breaking down how a computer works. Computers deal with instructions and memory. They can't think on their own. AI is just a bunch of if statements and loops. The whole idea behind a computer is that they can just do math really fast, faster than anything will ever match. So what we do is we break down the instructions for a computer. So let's take something like a variable. That's kind of where we store information. In programming, you'll have a lot of variables, and they all will have certain types or whatever. But the important thing to remember is that a variable is a storage container. That's all it is. In this example, the fruit box. The fruit box is a variable, and it has an apple. And we can use those variables. We can give it instructions using something called a function. A function would be a list of items using a variable. Notice how this says something about fruit box, and it says consume the contents. Without the variable fruit box existing, it wouldn't know where to pull apples from. It wouldn't know what to do. Consuming contents wouldn't make sense because there's nothing there for the computer. So variables and functions are the basis of how computers operate. So let's start looking at some actual code. If you have Visual Studio installed, this is the time where you're going to open it up. I'll even try to run through and hopefully I can make a new project pretty easily. The key thing is that you want to be using some sort of console application. It might say like console or .NET console or something like that. Doesn't really matter where you store it, just remember where you store it. Creating it, you'll probably end up with something like this. Maybe it'll have some really basic code for you. Also, I'm terribly sorry about the typing that you guys are going to hear. So, main should be thought of as the entry point to all your code. It's where your program will start. It's where it'll run from. It's where it'll do everything from. And it only does it once. And that's something that's weird because you think, like, my video game doesn't stop till I tell it to stop. How can a program run through and finish? We'll get to that later. But know that for sure, computers all have a single entry point to their, a program, and it's usually called main, and that's just where it runs from. So our first function. For those of you who have ever taken a class before, you've probably seen this immediately. Console.write, and actually, we're gonna do it's pretty close to the same thing, but write line helps a little bit with what we want to do later on. So, write line will write a string of letters out to the console, specifically the string of letters that we give it. If I write hello world and I run it, you'll see that's what it says. Change it to goodbye world, does the same thing. Let's break down how that works. So the command that we're giving, the function that we're giving this computer, is the instruction basically. The function at its core is a series of steps that the computer knows to take with a given piece of data. It's technically by definition an algorithm, even though it doesn't, seem like there's a lot of math going on. It is a series of steps. So if we break it down, we have the console.write, or in my example, console.write line. Zoom in a little bit so you guys can read it easier. Console.write line. The arguments, which is this part in the quotations, and then close, denoting that we're finished writing that command. This is something not unique to C#, but it's used a lot in C#. Just know console period write line or console period write is how you're going to be sending stuff to the console, how you're going to get basic output. I've numbered them 1 through 3. 1 tells the computer we're using the console. 2 tells it what we want to do, and it's called calling a function. When you're using the instruction, when you're using the function, it's called calling it. And then 3 begins it. 3 dictates that the function we're calling is called write. You can't actually have this character in a function call. That denotes that you're done. The next part, this part, the part in orange, is called the argument. Now, the argument to a function is the data that you're going to give it, that it'll do different stuff with. Saying that the voice is a little quiet. Yeah, let me try boosting my volume a little bit. Give me just a sec. I think it's as loud as it can be. I'll try moving the mic closer. Maybe that'll help. I don't know. Let me know if it works. Oh, you say there should be IS. Yeah, I already have it all the way up on OBS. Let me see if there's maybe like a boost or something. Yeah, it doesn't look like it. Or if there is, it's something that I don't know, and I'll have to do later. So I'm sorry if it's quiet. I don't think I have the solution available right now. I'll try to stay as close to the mic as I can though. So we've got this argument, and an argument is the data. In this case, it's a string. It's a string of letters, and those string of letters spell out a word message. In our example, it spells out goodbye world. So console.write or console.write line. Console.write line takes one argument. If you try to put something else in here, well, actually, this one might have some other things, but the one that we're using only has one argument. If we were to try to keep adding things in, like, let's try this. Nope, okay, it actually can take in more arguments, but we're never using this. The argument that it takes is the data that it knows to operate on. And then the last piece is pretty simple. It's just the closing parenthesis, and then this is the important part, the semicolon. That ends the line. That denotes that we're done with a piece of instruction. I wrote a tip here that you usually end a function, you usually have one function per line. That's usually true. You can, if you want, not do that, and then you can get code that's all on one line with semicolons, and it looks terrible. And if you ever do that, I just won't look at the project. That's atrocious. So here I start going through some more examples about changing the message and stuff. But you guys have seen that. We were able to change it, get it to run differently, and get it to do different things. So we move down a bit. The variables. Now this is the part. We go back to the Apple slide. This is the fruit box. This is where we're going to be storing things at, and this is where things start to actually seem a little bit more like you can do stuff. So we have our string message that says "Hello World," and if you remember, you see these quotations and how it's orange, and then you see these quotations and how it's orange. Well, that's because this data has a specific type, and that type is string. We'll go over all the types in a little bit, but the main thing here is that your string variable can contain data and it can be referenced elsewhere. So here I showed you can use it to write. You can write the message that you stored in your variable, and you can actually, if I were to write console.write message several times, I could rinse and repeat, and it would keep spitting out whatever I put here. So let's try that. Let's do string message, set it equal to hello, and then instead of goodbye world, we will instead use the actual variable. If we run that, you'll notice it says hello. And that's because the data type's the same. This can take a variable as an argument. And if we were to, do this several times, you'll notice it uses the same thing. And if I change it once, it changes. And that's because variables, as data containers, things know to pull from that, they know to use the variable and to go inside and grab the data that holds. So here's where things get different. Obviously, you've seen the output. The input is something that it seems like it's simple enough to understand, but it really is more than you think. So in this example, our string input is just something about reading a line. I'll show you that in a sec. But furthermore, Furthermore, the input is every way that you interact with a computer. It's your keyboard in a video game. It's your mouse. It's your controllers. It's your voice. Every way that you interact with a computer is called input. And at some level, no matter what you do, if you look through the code, you'll find something that's essentially saying variable name equals way to get input, and it stores it somewhere. So, this is a variable. Let's try this. Let's try doing some input. Instead of saying string message equals something, let's say string message equals here we go. Console.read. Now it will, instead of printing out something, it will hang until we give it a line, and then it prints that message. So the idea here is that when you're taking input and storing it somewhere, that input can be dynamic. It's always dynamic. The idea is that you're able to react, make your program react to what your user does, and that becomes the whole loop of interactivity. If they press A and then make the character jump, play the jump animation, change their position. If they hit enter, start a new line in the text editor. These things, the input, output, and then reaction loop is kind of the basis of computer work. Okay, so now to variable types. So we discussed variables a little bit and how variables can be used to store data, but there's a second level to variables, which is typing. All variables have to have a type, and there's primitive types, and that's what we're going to be going over. So those primitive types. Let's start integer. Integers are ints. Their whole numbers can be negative or positive, and they can't have decimals. That's the key part. There are decimal-based things, but we're not going to use those yet. The point behind the integers is that you can use it to keep track of like iterations over something or the amount of stuff that you've used, or like player health, for example. If you have like get hit 2 times and you die, then health could be an integer. If you're like, oh, this player has like 30% health, that wouldn't be a good integer. That'd be something else. We have a character. Characters are like what we've been using. Those are strings. Characters, their whole purpose is that they only have one character ever. If I try to make a character that has more than one character, and notice it yells at me. It says it cannot convert a string to char because this is more than one character. But that if I do one character, it works fine. And another key thing to note that I should probably point out is this little thing, the single versus double quotation, is the difference between string and characters. Double quotations is strings, even if it's just a word of 1 letter long, that's still a string, and characters are the one. Yeah. So if I try to put 2 or more characters in it, it won't necessarily know what that is. Strings, we've seen strings. They're what we can use to send full messages, multiple characters in a row. It's pretty rare that we use characters except for niche things. Most of the time, if we're dealing with actual output, we're using strings. And these 3 are the big ones that we're going to be focusing on for the first practice project. All right, so logic flow. As I said before, code goes from the top of main to the bottom of main, and then it stops. That's it. But there's ways that we can adjust how it works, how it actually goes from the top to the bottom. Say there's commands we don't want to do all the time. Say we want to repeat actions. Say we want it to wait at things. Those are called flow controllers. Logic flow is how we do that, how we use those flow controllers. So a big part of flow control is that we want to make sure that we're not doing redundant instructions or instructions that we don't want to use, but or we only want to use sometimes. That those are taken care of, that they have a way to get into those. The big thing here is comparison, and computers are stupid. They basically can only do math. We're luckily in a day and age where we can turn strings into math without having to know exactly what it's doing. So the way that we compare things are with these operators. You can read them here: equals, not equals, greater, lesser, greater than or equal, and then lesser or equal. Most of these only work for math, but the equal to and not equal to, the ones that I use the most, those can work with a lot of things, notably here, strings. So that brings us to this next variable type, boolean. I don't know where the word boolean comes from, but it's just a question. It stores a truth or a false. You can use those comparatives that we showed earlier to ask those questions. So let's do an example of that right here. We have bool and we have call it question, and we'll say it's false. It's a bad question because the answer is the same all the time. It doesn't actually question anything, but that works as a boolean. It stores the false. The other thing that we can do, let's say boolean question is equal to the answer of is message equal to, notice how there's two equal signs? One equals set stuff, two equals asks the question. Say, is message equal to hello? And then we'll use console write line question. Now this is something tricky. Console write line can convert variable types to string. Know that even though this is a boolean, when it goes into that function, when the command is doing the thing, the computer is doing the calculations, it is turning it into a string. And then it does. Let me run it. So let's type no, and it says false. Message was not hello. Boolean turned out to be false. Run it again. It's hello. Says it's true. Booleans are really important because a lot of what you're doing is something called like if statements or their loops, and these things help to store questions that we've already asked, so we don't have to keep asking the computer, and so we can have one place that we check it. And here's if statements. So this is the first big thing that will dictate how your code works. Your if statements allow you to ask questions, and then only when those questions are true, it will do code. So this allows us to do things like conditional operation. Like, I'll just show you an example. All right. Instead of saying write line question, let's say if question, and it's implied, its question is true. So if, and I can even show you that here. We can write it all the way out. If question equals true. If the question is true, then we're going to console.writeLine. And then we'll always write done. We run this, and we say random stuff. And it says done. It did the done. Never actually said the question is true. Run it again. Hello. Question is true. So this is a simple example. In the project, you'll be using a lot of these types of things, a lot of if statements, to be able to figure out what you're doing and how the program should react to the user. The other thing, like an if statement, is a while loop. A while loop does the same thing as an if statement, but it does it again and again. It actually does it until the question is false. And it's really easy to see that, like, oh, well, if the question, if I just put in a question and it's true, it'll just keep going forever. And that's true. We want to, in our while loop, all the time, make sure that we're modifying the question in some way. So that's something that I have not shown you guys. So let's do a bit of a bigger example here. Let's say we have our question. Is the message hello? And then we'll say while done. Do some stuff. Let's make that variable before we try to use it. Actually, let's set it to not done. And then while not done is equal to false. So while, if I speak this in normal English, while we're not done, do code. Oh, this is a helpful tip. Those two slashes allow you to write messages in your code that won't turn into code. I use that to keep myself messages or to make messages to other programmers I'm working with if whatever I'm writing is confusing. It's really, really useful. Okay, so while not done is false. Go ahead and delete these things so they're not confusing. We will want to get a string from the user. Console.readLine. And then if input, the string we got from the user, if that is equal to done. Not done equals false. because we are done. So the opposite of done would be not done. So if the input is done, then it's false. Then we'll do this. Let's do that up here. So we run this. Are you finished or what? No. Yes. IDK. And then as soon as we write done, I messed up. Oh, we're supposed to set it to true. Not done would be true here. Try that again. Keeps going, right done, and it finishes. And I'll even write a little message down here. There you go. So this system, while loops, if statements, input, and output, that is kind of the majority of programming. Everything else that comes past this is just ways to combine lots of these things in ways that we don't want to have to manually do. In fact, for those of you who don't already know, a video game is actually just a giant while loop. It does something like this. We will, while not done, we keep going. We render the next frame. Yeah, Pyrex. Okay, so while not done, that exclamation point, I wasn't going to mention it, but since you showed it off, I'll go ahead and show them what it does. The exclamation point while not done negates, which means turns opposite or inverts a boolean. So while not done, which would be while. Wait, no, that might not work. Yeah, that'd be true. So let's write while done is equal to false. While not done, and then if we put done, then done is true. So this, in fact, I like that. Yeah, I don't like double negatives in variable names. I just was scared to give you guys the exclamation point, but this is reviewable, so you guys can go over it if you need to. While not done, we keep doing stuff until we're done. When the input is done, we say done is true. If the question of are we done becomes true. And then while not done, it keeps going. I'll run for you guys. Are we finished or what? No. I did that. And then write done, and it finishes. This whole process is, that's how video games work. If it's not done, if the program's not exiting, render the next frame. If you're in a main menu and they haven't hit A yet, show an animation showing what you're selecting. If they hit quit, ask them if they want to confirm. If they want to confirm, then then they'd be the equivalent of saying done is true. While it gets to here, they've confirmed it, goes back up here, says, oh, we're done, and then it exits. The game exits. That's how the whole thing works. These whole processes, this whole logic flow is, at its core, it's what all programming turns into. So I kind of went through this a little fast because there's not a lot I can do without you kind of jumping into it. So the project that we're all going to be doing is a project about using variables, while loops, and if statements. And it's a little bit hard. I know for a beginner standpoint, you kind of feel like you have no idea what's going on. You saw me type some text and things happen. How do I run the program would be a question that you'll probably be asking. We have the help channel. I really recommend that you use the help channel. If you get stuck on something for even a minute, please go there. Best case scenario, I use it as a great chance to explain something that other people are probably having. Worst case scenario, I tell you a hint and I say, figure it out using this, and then you figure it out and you feel like a genius. So the requirements for this first project. let's explain it. Ask the user what their name is. That would be something like writing this sentence, what is your name? Respond to their input by saying hello, followed by their name. Ask them to solve a math question. Now, this is something that'll be weird. But I think if you just use strings instead of involving ints here, it'll be a lot simpler. Tell them if they got it right, or vice versa, tell them if they got it wrong. Ask if they want to try it again. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. You may have seen code that does exactly that. And if they want to try again, repeat it. Like I said, this can be really challenging for beginners and for people who know basic programming. This is almost a waste of time. So I really, really recommend doing it, even if you know it. Just do it, get a project solved, just so we can establish a way for us to exchange, your turned in projects and feedback on them. The extra practice, if you find yourself finishing really fast, you want to keep trying stuff, here's a couple good ideas of how to do things. I haven't taught you how to do them. You'll have to Google and research to do it. But pro tip, if you're programming, Googling and research is pretty much what you do the majority of the time. You'll memorize a lot of things if you do them over and over again, but then you'll go do something else and then come back a year later and be Googling again. There's just no way to memorize everything that you'll ever know. So learning how to randomize the math question and check if they got it right. Keeping track of how many attempts before they solve it, that one's a little bit easier. Change the question to not be math related. That could be actually easier than what I've done, but I recommend if you're here, if you're in the extra practice, you're probably not looking to make this easier. You're probably looking to challenge yourself. So ask questions like, what is my favorite color? And then check if they, answer a color, and check, how do they say the color? Are there multiple ways they can say the color? Things like that. And if this is all really easy, if you're to the point where you're like, I understand all this, this is not a problem for me. Whip it together, throw it to me, say, hey, I'm past this, and then stick around and help. The help channel, there's a lot of us here. Originally, I only wanted a few of us. I only wanted to talk to 1 or 3 people, but the response was way bigger than that, and I would feel bad just telling everyone, like, sorry, go find someone else. So in the help channel, if you finish something, watch for questions, take it upon yourself to answer them, spark discussions. All this stuff is really good. You never know what you're going to say that might help a beginner out that has no idea about anything. Just even calling things like, by their terminology, giving them the jargon. That kind of stuff's going to make stuff way, way easier for them to research and look upon their own. So that ends this stream. If you guys have any questions in the chat, please go ahead and ask. I'm gonna stick around for 10 to 30 minutes until people stop asking questions. But if you have no extra questions, let me post this link in the Discord. You guys can have access. Actually, I did post it. I'll post it in practice assignments. Go ahead and start on it. I'm sure if this is at all a challenge for you, you might know where to start, and then you start and you immediately run into something. That's okay. All right. Doesn't look like anyone has questions. Well, I'm gonna shut the stream down. But I'll be around. I'll be watching help pretty much like a hawk. If you guys have questions or issues, don't have any problem reaching out. Even if that's related to getting Visual Studio started up too. I know that can be a challenge if you've never done it before. Okay, clarify the exclamation point. Yeah, I can do that. So we have our question, Booleans. Booleans have a true or a false. You can think of it like a left or a right, a 1 or a 0. A Boolean just represents something that is either one way or another. The whole point of putting an exclamation point before a question is it essentially asks the opposite of that question. So if I were to write, while done, that wouldn't make sense. While we're done, do stuff, we wouldn't want to do that. So instead I put that exclamation point while not done. And that allows us to do things like move forward through this whole loop. I guess the best way to describe this is it makes a temporary copy of a Boolean and sets it to the opposite of what that Boolean was. If that's confusing, just know that the exclamation point changes what it says. Does that answer the question? Does that help clarify anything? All right, cool. Cool deal. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Opposite, not good ways to describe it. That's actually a good point. I take a lot of this stuff for granted because I've been doing it for so long. There's a lot of really unfamiliar things going on here, a lot of intimidating parts of code. Um, Two things about it. Number one, I encourage you to ask questions if there's something you're curious about. If you're like, why does it say void? What's an args? What does static mean? Why does it say class? Stuff like that. Feel free to ask. I'll explain it. You probably won't get it, but you'll have more questions, and more questions lead to more answers. And eventually, you'll wrap this whole thing up in your head, and that's a good thing. The opposite side of that coin, if you don't know what it is and you don't need to, feel free to just ignore it. For example, at work, I've got access to this big code base. I don't know the whole code base. Yeah, I don't know the whole code base. I just end up going through, finding the parts I need to use for something, learning those, asking questions about those, and then doing my job. Um, I don't know the majority of the stuff going on. I don't think anybody really does. But we just sort of know where to look, and we research that part. And that's the same thing you'll want to do when you're approaching these. There's a lot of stuff, and you won't know it all yet, and that's okay. Um, I don't know how to pronounce it. Sev, then 7 8, 7 8. I'm just gonna call you Sev. I'm just gonna call you Seven. Um, Seven. Yeah. So to answer your first question, it took me. All right, well, let's see. I started when I was like 9, and I didn't feel like I knew anything about programming till I was probably 15, and then it took me until from 15 till like 21 before I really, or I wouldn't say 20, 15 till like 19 or 20 before I really was like, this programming thing, I get it. I can approach everything, even if I don't know. I know where to start. Um, it'll take a while, and that's okay. It's not like you ever feel bad about it. It's a constant improvement. You always feel like you're learning more and you're getting more access to stuff. Um, the best part about something as big as programming is that there's always something new to learn. There's always something for you to gain, and I think that's really encouraging. As far as group introductions, learning about each other, I wasn't going to do anything official. I wasn't going to like at everyone tell me about yourself. Um, but I encourage if you guys have like interesting things to share about yourselves, please do. Actually, you know what? Let me start with myself. I went to Full Sail, which is a college down in Florida. I went for actually game development was the name of the degree, and I almost went for game design, which is really it was not a good path for me. Um, I barely knew that game development was programming related, and I was like, oh, programming could be fun. I'll try that. Um, I I was in there for 2 years. We did this accelerated program. Um, it was hell, but I'm glad I finished it. I'm glad I did it. Now everything seemed easy in comparison. I've been coding since I was, I think I said 9. I used something called Game Maker back then, and I used Visual Scripting, which is I recommend it if you like to get results really quick. I don't recommend it if you want any results past what a tutorial would finish for you. Um, I've kind of always loved video games. I'm big into RPGs. Wanted to make my own RPG. Still haven't because every time I sit down to do it, it's just way too big. And then I got my job that I have now. I've been working there. I just got my first year anniversary I got a cool jacket. It's pretty sick. That about sums me up. Yeah. What about you guys? Where are you from? Why do you like programming? LA. That's a big place. LA is man. If you learn to program in LA, oh, 5 years as a developer back. Okay, back end. Yeah. Okay, so this is probably this is probably stuff that you're really familiar with. Um, yeah, man, back end is some shit. I'll tell you, that's really hard. It's not even like it's not like super logic hard. Although I mean, it can be. All programming can be. Um, the hard part that I find about backend is that you don't ever get any credit for like the genius ways you set stuff up. Oh, nice! 2 years of Python. I actually really like Python. A lot of programming like forums tend to shit on it because it's like a little kid language, and I disagree. I think Python's amazing because I think you can finish stuff with Python really quick. You can get something running, and it integrates in so many ways. Uh, you can use Python with C Sharp and also with Unity, and it's it's so quick to get something up and running, and it's so honestly it's slower than like super powerful languages, but it's pretty fast for what it is. We actually took a database class about SQL, and it was I couldn't handle it. I had to go in for tutoring all the time just because like it was a lot of programming esque stuff, and then it also wasn't. It was like you run commands by typing them in, and then also have watch. Yeah, yeah, Python does go with Unity. Um, not it requires some wiring. You have to like figure out how to get it to work with it, but you can get Python stuff operating in Unity. But man, SQL. Those two people at my work who pretty much handle all the SQL, and every time I like look at their computer, I'm just like, God bless that you have this job and you're there, and I don't have to do that. That stuff's scary. Actually, you know what? Seth? I kind of do like the idea of introducing everybody, especially if you're beginners. It's hard to ask for help if you feel like you're surrounded by people who are all smarter than you and who all know Joe. So let me post something in the Discord. Oh shit, you were the guy who got in the car crash, dude. That sucks. Being in a place where you need to drive and where cost of living is high, just to have your car totaled, it is rough. I feel for you. Um, I'm kind of the same way. It's about like challenging myself. Um, at work, when things start to cool down, I find myself getting antsy. I'm lucky we have such a big backlog of bugs that I can like go and chew on because if if things get too easy, I don't know, I get bored. I feel you. I wish I knew what any of the stuff you're talking about with what your service was, because I really don't know a lot about military things. But I mean, I thank you for your service. I wish more people would be cognizant of that. I know it can be hard. I think I hit enter too quick on the Discord message. Um, what inspired me to do it? Well, I guess the biggest thing is that when I was trying to learn, it took me, a lot of years to get to the point where I felt comfortable. And I think the issue with that was that I was trying to survive off of tutorials and code that other people wrote and trying to figure out how it worked. And I could read it, I could understand it, but I couldn't, quote unquote speak it. And I think that's the big issue that a lot of beginners face is that when you're learning this stuff, you don't sit down and write code. Um, and I figured if I could provide a curriculum, a set of steps that have you writing code for everything that you're learning, you'll really be able to catch on and start exploring things on your own. And when we get into Unity, you'll have a lot of tools at your disposal to create games with sprites and animations. And even if the animations look bad and the sprites are horrible, you'll have a game that you can make that you can show other people. And I think that is really encouraging for beginners. And I wish I'd had something like this when I was learning. Is all. It's funny you say that. I'm in Windows myself. The I actually work on a Mac at work. I I don't know why people prefer it. I know why I prefer it, and I like the Linux parts of it because Mac is a Unix based system, same as Linux. They have a similar ancestor, and I like the Unix things that I can do with it. The Bash terminal, Bash scripting really speeds up a lot of my tedious things. And the the Mac support, yeah, for real, Bash is so much better than command prompt. I literally installed like Ubuntu on my Windows as a virtual machine, so I can use that using instead of using command. Um, the thing with Macs is that a lot of the products that you get for development tend to be really well supported, and frankly, they tend to have less issues. Um, the Although I would hesitate to say people prefer it over Linux. There's some people who are very strongly Linux leaning, and if you told them that, they would yell at you and fight you. I've seen some good stuff come out of Linux users. There's people at work who run full Linux setups on their Macs just because they prefer it. Um, the I don't really know the big issues with Windows. I think it's just a matter of the other options are better. And yeah, I have prepped in Windows approximately one time, and at that point, I decided it wasn't worth it. All the spaces and folder names and stuff like that, having to put everything in quotes and escape characters everywhere, it is so bad. It's the worst. All right, we are nearing the last 10 minutes that I'll be available live, at least not on stream. If you guys have any last minute questions, I recommend you get them in now. Well, it's sort of looking like everyone is good. Oh, okay. What do you think about coding boot camps? Um, So I've never actually done a boot camp. I can't speak from firsthand experience. So what I'm telling you is stuff that I've learned secondhand or from just seeing stuff online on various forums. Coding boot camps vary wildly depending on or very wildly in terms of quality. Um, but a lot of them can be very good if you're trying to learn one very focused thing. And I think that especially if you're trying to get in very fast, if you're very passionate and want to be pushing yourself a lot, boot camps are a great way for you to start arming yourself with the tools to approach problems. I would just be wary because they're kind of a fad thing as of recent, and not that there's anything wrong with it inherently, but when you see something get popular like a boot camp, you'll see people chasing after it and trying to get their boot camp up and in, and it might be a terrible boot camp. Like if what I was doing now, if I just announced it as a boot camp, I could make a lot of money, and it probably would be a waste of that money. You'll have a lot of people doing stuff like that. So if you have nearby boot camps, scope them out. Whether or not it's worth your time and your money, it's up to you. It's a hard evaluation to make. Yeah, no problem. I'm glad you were asking, Clem. A lot of people. A big thing that I didn't realize until I started looking into how teaching works. A lot of times, one person will ask a question that several people need to answer or need the answer for. So I'm glad that you're speaking up. That'll really be a big help. Well, it doesn't look like anyone has any super pressing questions. I think I'm gonna sign off for now. Again, I'll be watching help. I really encourage you guys to at least get started on the project, even if you don't finish it today. Uh, it's worth diving into just because you the things you don't know you're going to run into are the things that you don't know you're going to see. So the moment that you start going through the steps to actually get something running, you'll start to really feel like, oh, there's this thing I need. I wish I would have asked them. Start those early because the last couple days before turn in, I, I I won't have time to answer everything. Um, okay, to answer that, are you okay with people posting the project code? I hadn't really thought about that. I think the answer is easy. Yes, but only after the project dateline has passed. I'm fine with us sharing our solutions, and I encourage it because learning is great, and we can learn a lot from how other people approach things. But for beginners, if you have solutions, it is very easy to indulge the temptation and just steal the solution, look at it, be like, oh yeah, that's how I would have done it, and then do it the exact same way. that is that's a really big problem when you're first starting out, and it will hinder you so much. So I ask that you do not share it for the time being. You can share parts of it. You can share ways that you approach individual aspects. That's okay with me. But don't share the entirety. And certainly, here's another big thing: if people are asking for help, don't give them the answer in syntax. If they need help, encourage them, give them hints, show them, tell them maybe help with the logic side, and then if they can demonstrate they understand the logic on their own, show them how to convert that parts of logic into syntax. But delivering solutions doesn't help anyone. Yeah, pseudocode. Um, at this level, I would even later on, yeah, pseudocode will be great. At this level, I would even suggest pseudocode might be too dangerous because of how simple these solutions might be. Pseudocode could easily just it could solve the problem for them. And it's not necessarily a bad. There are times to use it. I'll leave it at your discretion. Again, I'm not a teacher. You're not paying me. I'm not going to grade you. But if people are stealing solutions, and even if you pseudocode something out for someone and they just take it, it just hurts them. So I mean, pseudocode is a wide range of things. For those of us who don't know what pseudocode is essentially a hybrid between real code and just plain speak. You sort of say the solutions, but you say them using keywords and phrases that computers use. So I can give you an example actually, because it's really useful, especially when you're trying to solve problems. I can be like, while I'm done, right, are you done? They say yes. Mark done as true. And then so this is an example of how to pseudocode what I've just done. It's a really great tool for yourself if you're trying to like run through something. You don't have to get it all in syntax. You can write it out, figure out how it would work. I would even recommend running through things and having a little notepad where you scribble in the variables and what they are as you step through the program. But you know, code sharing can be bad. It's a hard line to mark. I don't want to give any like authoritative stances on it, but you know, if you're understanding stuff and you feel like you can help, and you were to give someone pseudocode, take a sec to think: would I be depriving them of the ability to find this out themselves? All right, 2 more minutes. Anything else? Any panicking matters? Let's see if people are biting in Gen Chat. Yeah, cool. The person is. All right, 1 more minute. If you're afraid, speak up. You too, Seven. Hope you have a good luck getting started, and I hope that you're able to figure this stuff out, even if it's challenging at first. Last call for questions. I'll give you guys about 30 seconds, and then the close up. It doesn't look like anybody has anything further. So with that, I'm signing off. Thank you guys, those of us who were able to come in and watch it live. For those of you guys watching at home, watching recording, um, I really do recommend you reach out to help for anything that you need. It will be a little bit tougher because you weren't here live. You weren't able to ask those questions you may be having in the middle of watching it. Couple extra things, couple last minute things about the project. This one I'm going to have for 2 weeks, for two reasons. Number one, I really want beginners to be able to finish this, and I know beginners do not understand how hard something might be. They might underestimate the amount of difficulty it'll be to finish it. So I'm going to be this first one will be for 2 weeks, and um, following that it'll probably be 1 week. We'll go project to project determining that. Um, I'll write some of the stuff down too, so it's in writing, easily accessible. As far as turn-ins go, the whole point of you turning it in is not for me to grade it. It's for me to verify that you were able to succeed and that you were able to figure out what we were doing. Um, the flip side of that is that there will be a lot of times you're not able to. A lot of times that you're struggling with something. If that's the case, the unfortunate truth is that there's not a lot I can do. I mean, I can help you as you're working on it, but if you find yourself stuck at the last minute, there's not a ton that we can do. Um, the best thing at that point, stick around for the next lesson, stick around for the next project, work through the things that you're doing, um, and then go back and finish it. Uh, I understand that everyone works at different paces, and these things are going to be difficult to fully organize with as many people as we have, which is another reason I really want people ask and help all the time and talk with each other because I'm only one me, but there's many you. The the one thing that I don't want, however, if if you're not working on it at all, um, and you're not informing me, like, hey, I have something coming up, it's important, I can't work on the project, I will not finish it. If you're not keeping me informed, um, at that point, I'm likely to just set you to a watcher, not because of any animosity towards you, just because the amount of resources that I have to help people is limited, and if you're not wanting to spend time working on it, that's fine, personal choice. The stream's still public, projects are still public, you can still watch everything. Um, then you'll do it from this side. You're asking where you can submit it. I will set up a better submission. My original plan was just like Discord messages, but I don't think that'll work. I'll figure out a better way for you to submit in the next couple coming days. It'll likely be through some either a web portal or maybe like a Discord bot. Worst case scenario, though, it will be like a Discord message, just a DM. Hey, this is the project. Just put it in a zip file. If it's too big for Discord, you can upload it to like Google Drive or Dropbox and send me a link that way. Um, I think that about covers it. Any further questions, please put it in the Discord chat so we can all see it. We can all answer it together. Thank you guys for showing up. I hope this was a good first session.